In high school, my best friend and I were hanging out and drinking with this group of a few guys that we had known for a while. When it was time for us to go home for curfew, they told us they would walk with us. The fastest way was across a creek bed and down under an overpass, and we had gone that way a million times before. I had a really bad feeling about walking that way that night. I had brand new white shoes on, so I used that as my reason for wanting to walk the long way, on public streets. My friend was annoyed and the guys got mad and told us to walk by ourselves. A few months later, 3 of those guys were arrested for raping a girl when she got drunk with them. I don't know if anything really would have happened that night, but I do remember being really scared for no apparent reason. When I was a teen, I'd make a few bucks helping a local farmer bale hay. The hay would be stacked on a trailer and towed by tractor to the barn. I usually sat on the front of the trailer on the way to the barn, but I suddenly felt like that wasn't a good place to be and I moved to the back. As soon as I did, I heard a clang. The hitch had come loose from the tractor, while heading down a steep hill. I climbed down the back and easily stepped off, moments before the trailer flipped over into a ravine. I used to work on a horse breeding ranch as a side gig. Your story reminds me of one of my own. I made pretty good money at the time, $20 cash an hour, working 4 to 8 hours a day. I was in town one day picking up supplies for the owner, and I was approached by a grain silo manager. Like a co-op. The guy offered me a job while talking. He managed a co-op about 10 miles away. He offered me like $28 an hour and I told him I'd think about it. It would have been a part-time gig, so I figured, hey sweet, more extra money. So on what should be my first day of working for this guy, a few days later, he calls me and tells me something came up and he's not going to be able to train me that day, so to come the next day. I'm just like, okay. Cool beans. A few hours later the co-op blew up in a grain dust explosion and killed like 3 people. These people were all doing the job I would have been doing. When I was a teen, I'd make a few bucks helping a local farmer bale hay. The hay would be stacked on a trailer and towed by tractor to the barn. I usually sat on the front of the trailer on the way to the barn, but I suddenly felt like that wasn't a good place to be and I moved to the back. As soon as I did, I heard a clang. The hitch had come loose from the tractor, while heading down a steep hill. I climbed down the back and easily stepped off, moments before the trailer flipped over into a ravine. Not me, my grandfather. He used to never wear his seatbelt. One day he's driving around with my mom and suddenly remarks, "I feel like I'm about to go through the windshield," and buckles in. Less than 30 seconds later, as they're going through an intersection, a car blows the red light going like 40 miles per hour and slams into my grandpa's side of the car. He walked away with nothing worse than some fractured ribs, and now he always wears his seatbelt. My 3-year-old was strapped in his car seat and suddenly started saying, "Locked doors, locked doors." I pressed the button to keep him happy, and just a few seconds later a drunk guy came from behind the car and tried to open the doors and get in. Ours were locked, but he went to the car in front and opened theirs and started punching the driver. The lights had just changed, so the driver tore off and I followed him, leaving the drunk guy stumbling across the road. My son was tightly belted into a chunky car seat. There's no way he could have seen behind us, and he was in the back so couldn't see the side mirrors either. Not sure if it qualifies, but I used to live and work in the suburbs. One evening I was driving home at dusk. I was 18 to 19 and had the house to myself. Brother was out of town and mom was at her parents'. My job was about 10 miles from my house and maybe 6 turns on decently sized roads. I'm a fairly observant person and it wouldn't be odd for the same car to be behind me for half of those turns, but this time a car followed me all the way to my residential street. I got a gut feeling I was being followed, so I passed my house and turned left. My house was one over from the corner of another residential street that was a quarter-mile loop that also had another small street in it that reconnected to the loop, then back to my street. This car followed me as I made a loop. I then turned right to restart the loop and it followed me again. This time I turned down the small street and completed the loop again. It followed me one more time. As I was about to make the loop for the 4th time, they finally drove off. I drove around another 5 minutes just to make sure they didn't circle back, as I had nowhere else to park except out front of my house, but I was creeped out the rest of the night. I slept with my door locked and barricaded and with a big kitchen knife. I have no idea if or why they followed me. Don't know if it was a friend pranking me or if my brother put one of his friends up to it, since it's the only time that's ever happened and it was quite coincidental that I was alone. I worked retail and some of the employees did have records, so I just don't know. That's scary. If they were pranking you, wouldn't they have eventually told you? Eek. When I was 16, my friend and I were in her car and she said the car in front was following us. I thought she was paranoid, and how does the car in front follow you? But then we did some creative driving and he did follow us the whole time. We'd indicate to turn and he'd quickly turn. He ended up behind us and then followed us. In the end we went and parked by the local police station and the guy drove off. I did look at him and he did look scary. I noticed pain in my lower back one morning and thought I slept on it wrong or something. Throughout the day it continued and started to feel like when you get kicked in the groin. Thought to myself it's probably cancer. Did a self-check and didn't think I noticed anything and had my GF do the same and she wasn't sure. Called a urology office on my gut feeling and got the last appointment before Christmas break. It was cancer but it was super early. Got an orchiectomy a few days later, then some mild chemo a few months later and have been just fine ever since. Someone I came in contact with at work semi-frequently, once every 1 to 2 months, gave me the creeps but for no apparent reason. He never said anything inappropriate or touched me, and I could never figure out why. A couple years later it came to light he was drugging young patients and videotaping raping them in his clinic, family medicine doctor. His wife found the footage and turned him in. I have so many situations like this but this one definitely stands out. I live by the mantra if it feels weird it is weird. Our gut instincts are usually spot on. When I was pregnant, I got bit by a Lyme tick at 28 weeks. Noticed the bullseye and got on antibiotics. My obgyn brushed it off after that, no harm done according to her. When I went to the hospital at 35 weeks to register for delivery, normal procedure here, I mentioned the Lyme but that I took UGS. Next day, they call me and tell me they want to induce at 37 weeks because Lyme can damage the placenta and they would rather not risk it. Oof. I talked to my obgyn about it and she basically laughed it off telling me not to induce. My gut instinct told me to induce, so I went with the hospital's advice and had my son at 37 weeks. He was tiny and it was a tough few weeks after that getting him to eat and stuff because he was so tiny and tired. The hospital sent the placenta to pathology. It was severely damaged and wouldn't have held up much longer. If I had listened to my obgyn, I would have probably lost my son. Needless to say, I switched obgyns after that. This is not mine but is chilling. About 15 years back, I worked with a guy who told me that in his younger days, age 12 if I recall correctly, he attended a local youth club. One night, the guy that ran it wanted the boys to go shirts v skins for a game of football or whatever. My workmate was to be in the skins team. He refused to take his shirt off. One thing led to another. A big drama ensued. He got kicked out club and sent home. His mom and dad weren't happy, starting giving him a row, asking why he'd made such a fuss. He said he wasn't comfortable taking his top off in front of the youth leader as there was just something about the guy. A few years later, the youth leader, Thomas Hamilton, brutally murdered 16 children and their teacher in Dunblane Primary School. This is my dad's story. My grandfather was old but in good health. Every night, my dad used to call my grandfather, tell him he's coming over, then go and spend an hour talking to my grandfather. One night he had this feeling. He had to go. Just had to go. He called, and said he was coming. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But then a series of really unlikely things happened. Walmart register transaction had some technical issues that took 15 minutes to sort out. Then there was an accident causing more traffic backup that added another delay. Then a third thing that I no longer remember. When my dad finally got to my grandfather had died. As if he had simply fallen over in his bedroom mid-step. My dad, a physician, actually, wonders to this day. What if he had shown up just 30 or 45 minutes earlier? At school there was an event with a little buffet line. I was in line next to one of my classmates I didn't know well. Nothing happened. Might have said a word or two to him. I went to sit down next to my now husband. We hadn't been dating long. He whispered that I should never be alone with the classmate that was next to me in line. I pushed him for more. Did he know him? He said no, never seen him before, but he could tell he was a bad dude. Couldn't really explain it. Later that year we learned he raped at least 7 classmates. Husband said he's only gotten that feeling a few times but it always pans out. He just can read criminal sociopaths or something. We listen to that gut feeling when it happens. Bet your husband gets a lot of flack for being mean for no reason? I sometimes get a weird gut feeling about some women. That they are the absolute obsessive ruin your life kinda type and you should not get into relationships or friendships with them. Everyone always tells me I'm being mean when I say they have bad vibes. In the end though my gut was always right. I am not an I told you so person. More like a sigh and help them clean up the mess kind of person when they finally realize for themselves, which sometimes takes way too many boundary crossing behaviors, but it really sucks that people think I'm just a mean girl or jealous. Not my feeling, but my mom's a few weeks ago. She works near me and also lives near me and was going home at lunch to meet a plumber and offered to drive me to my house so I could let my dog out. I normally take the bus to work and then bus home at lunch and back, so the plan was for her to drive me home so I could walk my dog for a bit longer and then I'd take the bus back. But when we got to my house, she said she thought she better just drive me back to work real quick, it's like 10 minutes, and then go meet the plumber. On our way back we saw ambulances and police cars going back towards my house. I pulled up the police scanner and we realized there was a shooting at my bus stop at the time I would have been waiting for the bus back to work. Not me, but my daughter. We were at a mall and had just arrived at the food court. My daughter, 24, suddenly got agitated and said, "We have to leave. We have to leave now." I thought she was about to get sick and told her to head to the car, that I was going to get her siblings some lunch, and we'd be right out. She looked terrified and said, "No. We have to go now." I had no idea what was wrong, but we quickly went to the car. We were still in the parking lot 10 minutes later, waiting in traffic, when several police cars zoomed in with sirens going. Found out later a gang fight broke out in the food court where we'd just been. A dozen people were arrested. We have absolutely no idea what she picked up on. There was no yelling or angry voices, no groups gathering, no people who appeared to be anything but families getting lunch. But somehow she knew something was about to happen. I've had those feelings before. There's no way to explain them, but I've never not heeded the impulse. I've avoided multiple car accidents and ran off stage during a tech rehearsal seconds before a very heavy flat hanging above the stage fell down. 60-year-old cable finally snapped. Shouting at my daft brother-in-law to get out of the sea. He's a fit, strong, confident swimmer, but he had his young daughter on his shoulders and my gut was telling me that the waves were just too rough to be safe. They were both fine, but after we all returned home we heard that another strong, confident swimmer died in exactly the same place about half an hour later. About 15 years ago, I lived in a subdivision north of Seattle, and I was out jogging one morning. There were lots of houses and apartment buildings around, but I was coming up to a stretch of road that had some sort of woods on either side of it, which I had jogged through many times before. However, on that day, a white van passed me going pretty slowly and I noticed about 4 blocks up ahead, it had stopped and was just parked on the side of the road. My gut started pinging pretty loudly to not jog on, and just turn around and run home, which I did. I'm super glad I did that because I'm almost 100% positive that van was waiting for me. My grandparents let this one guy stay with them and do some side projects for cash for a few days. When I met him, he made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. He seemed nice on the surface, but he also just felt wrong somehow. Like a year later, he shot up his entire family, then had a multiple-hour standoff with the SWAT team before finally being tear-gassed out and surrendering. So while I didn't do anything, it's crazy how my intuition knew this guy was bad news. When I was about 11/12 walking home from school with my friend, same age, a man driving a red car drove past, slowed down and watched us. He then drove off, turned around, came back and did the exact same thing. Slowly drove past and watched us. He did this at least 5 times as we continued walking home. I had the worst feeling in my gut, I knew something was wrong. My friend was almost home, so I said to her, "As soon as this red car drives off and we can't see it, we're gonna run as fast as we can home." As soon as we lost sight of the car we both ran in opposite directions home. I have never run so fast in my life. The street I had to go down was a dead end and had a park attached to it which I lived on the opposite side of. When I turned around to look back at the road, I could see the red car driving down it. We both got home safe. Not sure if this constitutes the scariest, but there was a guy I used to go to community college with back in 2014 to 2016. Call him Mark. Mark was older than me by several years, and if memory serves, was studying political science. We had mutual friends and I'd see him at parties or at hangouts. Can't say he always gave me the creeps, but I definitely noticed there was something about him that was off. Ironically enough, he could be surprisingly charismatic and didn't have a difficult time with women despite not being the most handsome guy in the world. What really got me though was one time at a hangout, Mark and I got to talking. I said something to him that made him stop and stare me down. I stared back because I thought it was in jest, and then I noticed there just wasn't anything in his eyes. Like staring into black holes. Fucking tripped me out. Remarkably intelligent guy, too. And I'm almost ashamed to say that we ended up getting along for some time after that because I was never able to shake the off feeling he gave me. But I could only ever tolerate him in doses, so I kept him at a distance until I found out who he really was. Apparently, years before we ended up at community college together, he'd either been in some kind of frat, or communal living where he threw this party and ended up raping a woman. Found this out through a close friend who knew him then, but who was beaten unconscious by the other people in the house before he could stop it from happening. He told me that Mark had apparently done psychedelics out in the desert with some friends prior to that incident, and when he got back he was just different. Obviously I ensured there was no contact between us anymore. Well, through mutual friends, I found out that a few years ago he murdered his mom. Dude had a psychotic break, killed her and dumped her body in his town's lake. Made the local news. Dude's still so out of it he's been put into the state's mental institution for the rest of his life. In the days of MySpace, a girl I knew through high school extracurriculars posted a vague warning about an active duty sailor she met online who seemed normal but suddenly wouldn't take no for an answer. I messaged her to ask if she was okay and she told me his name, warning me not to engage with him if he tried to contact me. She then mentioned how she had been deleting some of her pics and profile details because she honestly thought he might try to show up where she worked or even at our shared after-school activity. Literally the following week, I had shown up for said extracurricular and was in the process of setting up with a few other people. The girl was in the women's restroom down a long dark isolated hall far removed from the primary entryway. Out of nowhere, a guy who looked high schoolish in face and build, and could fit in with us only in that sense, but who I had never seen before, showed up and began looking around as if he knew the place and knew what he was after. I was used to other kids around my age dropping by to visit us out of curiosity, but they would normally just stand around awkwardly until approached. This guy's level of focus struck me as extremely disconcerting and I couldn't shake this feeling that I needed to tell the girl first and any nearby adult. Because I felt so weirded out, I already knew I didn't want to talk to him, so I looked at the sign and sheet at the entryway. He was the creeper the girl told me about. As soon as I knew that he couldn't take notice of where I was headed, I booked it down the hall toward the women's restroom where I found the girl and told her what I saw and how I knew it was him. She started crying uncontrollably and I told her to lock the door and that I was going to tell the adults in charge as soon as I could find them. I then found two of the adults and told them what I saw and knew of the situation, the fact that the guy in question was literally just in the other room from us, and that the girl had already locked herself in the bathroom. I was only 15, I don't know how I stayed so calm. The adults kicked right into action, escorting the guy off the premises and filing a police report.